Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I'm going to be answering the question, why isn't Sol Ring banned in Commander? I mean, this card is incredibly powerful, and there are plenty of reasons as to why it shouldn't be banned, but there's also plenty of reasons as to why it shouldn't be banned, and today I'm going to talk about both, so let's jump into it. So let's start things off with the card itself. Sol Ring is an artifact that costs 1 and it taps to add colorless. Now, it might be a very simple card in design, but sometimes the simplest cards can be the most powerful. The very first Sol Ring was printed all the way back in Alpha in 1993. There are a ton of broken cards from that set because Wizards was still trying to figure out how to balance effects and mechanics. For example, let's take a look at Healing Salve and Ancestral Recall. Each of these are part of a cycle of cards that each cost 1 mana of a different color, and each involves doing something what their color does with the number 3. So Healing Salve is an instant for a white and says choose 1, target player gains 3 life or prevent the next 3 damage will be dealt to any target this turn. An Ancestral Recall is an instant for a blue that says target player draws 3 cards. Yeah, so those things are nowhere near equal. At the time it might not have seemed that way, but Healing Salve is not banned anywhere. Ancestral Recall is banned in Legacy, Commander, and Restricted in Vintage. Because yeah, drawing 3 cards for 1 mana at instant speed is absolutely insane. And gaining 3 life or preventing 3 damage is pretty weak. So it's definitely understandable to see how Sol Ring could be printed. The value of an artifact that costs 1 and taps for 2 definitely wasn't truly understood back then. I definitely don't think that Wizards is going to print a new card that is as efficient as Sol Ring, because over time they've come to better understand the value of ramping and mana. Now I'm going to give you both sides of the argument for banning and not banning Sol Ring, and I'll let you know my opinion at the end of this. So with all that said, let's jump into the arguments for banning Sol Ring. The first argument for banning Sol Ring is that it is hyper efficient. On my channel, I like to say that you want at least 50% of the mana that you put into a mana rock. So a mana rock like Everflowing Chalice is perhaps the best example of this. It's an artifact that costs 0 and it's got multi-kicker too. It enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it for each time it was kicked. And you can tap it to add a colorless for each charge counter on it. So if you put 2 mana into it, it taps for 1. If you put 4 mana into it, it taps for 2, and so on and so forth. Most of the time in Commander, I'm looking for a ramp spell on turn 2 that ramps me by 1. And this one's extremely flexible, so it can come in handy later in the game as well. But again, if we're saying that this mana rock is 50% efficient because we get half the amount of mana that we put into it, how does that stack up compared to Sol Ring? Sol Ring gives you twice as much mana as you put into it. It costs 1 less than Everflowing Chalice, and it also taps for 1 more. So essentially it's 200% efficient, and if my math is correct, that's 4 times as efficient as a regular mana rock like Everflowing Chalice. This kind of hyper efficiency is absolutely absurd. I highly doubt that Wizards is ever even going to print another mana rock that costs 1 and taps for 1. So 100% efficiency for a mana rock that costs 1 is out of the question, but 200% is legal in Commander. But now let's compare this to another mana rock that costs 2 and taps for 1 with Arcane Signet. It costs 2 and taps to add 1 mana of any color in your Commander's color identity. Now when this was printed, many players were upset and said that it was a mistake that it was actually even printed in the first place. Essentially it's seen as an auto-include in nearly every deck. Yes, it does ramp as well as fix your mana, but it's still nowhere near as efficient as Sol Ring. But now let's move on to the next argument for banning with fast mana bans. There are other types of fast mana artifacts that are currently banned in Commander like the Moxon. Mox Sapphire is one of those, and it's an artifact that costs 0 and it taps to add blue. In case you aren't sure what the Moxon are, there are 5 of them and each tap for a different color. And unsurprisingly, like Sol Ring, they are also from Alpha. So the Moxon can be played for free and ramp you right away. Now they do produce a color, but technically they give you access to the same amount of mana as a Sol Ring on turn 1. You play a land, you tap your Moxon, that's 2 mana. You play a land, you cast your Sol Ring, and you tap it for 2. Now the difference is that the Moxon produce colored mana, but Sol Ring does not. Regardless, if you've got any of these on turn 1, you're way ahead of the rest of the table. But after turn 1, throughout the game, Sol Ring is going to produce much more mana for you. Again, essentially it taps for twice as much as the Moxon. So then the argument there is, if the Moxon are banned, shouldn't something like Sol Ring be banned as well? In some ways it's less effective, but in some ways it's even more effective than the Moxon. Moving on though, let's move on to the third argument for banning Sol Ring, which I'm calling King of Auto-Includes. Auto-include essentially means a card that should be played in every single deck that you can play it in. Now, although I don't personally believe in auto-includes, Sol Ring is probably the closest thing to one. According to EDH Rec, it sees play in 80% of decks. That is an absurdly high number, meaning that 4 out of 5 decks that you see are gonna have Sol Ring in them. The next highest on their list for most used cards is Swords to Plowshares. So let's compare Sol Ring's percentage to the Swords to Plowshares percentage for eligible decks. Over the past 2 years, it's seen play in 56% of decks, which is still very high, but yet that's 24% lower than Sol Ring. That's just how dominant that Sol Ring is. The number 1 used card in Commander is just leagues beyond the rest of the list. For comparison's sake, let's take a look at the next highest artifact, which is Arcane Signet. It's currently seeing play in 41% of eligible decks. So yeah, 41% compared to Sol Ring's 80% is nearly half. And again, many players were up in arms about Arcane Signet being a problematic auto-include. And even if it is, Sol Ring is well above that when it comes to being an auto-include. Because if there is such thing as an auto-include, Sol Ring is probably the card that many consider to be at the top of that list. But now let's jump to the other side of the argument as to why Sol Ring shouldn't be banned. The first point that I'm going to bring up, I'm calling checks and balances. Commander is extremely unique in that it's a multiplayer Singleton format. So not only are you competing against more than one player, but you're also competing against variants. You can only have one Sol Ring in your 100 card deck. You have an extremely low chance of getting Sol Ring in your opening hand, which is a good thing. And you even have a low chance of getting it later on during the game. And even if one player starts off with a Sol Ring, the multiplayer nature of the format still has it balanced. Because when that player gets ahead right away, they are the threat and they are targeted by the other 3 players. Now that could be immediately targeting the Sol Ring with something like a Return to Nature, or working together to take down the player. Even if you get a very quick start, it can be extremely difficult to outlast 3 players. At a base level, for every 1 card that you draw, your opponents in total are drawing 3. And the exact same thing can be said about playing lands. So a 3-on-1 is definitely not ideal, and a turn 1 Sol Ring can definitely put that target on your back. Now let's move on to my second point, which is a broken but balanced format. There are other broken ramp cards that are not banned. First up, let's talk about Mana Crypt, an artifact that costs 0 and it can tap for colorless. It has at the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Mana Crypt deals 3 damage to you. So essentially this is a free Sol Ring, you don't even have to pay to get it out. In exchange, you're basically taking 1.5 damage on each of your upkeeps, which is well worth it. This is extremely fast mana, even faster than Sol Ring, giving you access to 3 mana on turn 1. Another card that isn't banned is Mana Vault. Mana Vault is an artifact that costs 1 and it taps to add colorless. Now it doesn't untap during your untap step, but you can untap it by paying 4. And at the beginning of your draw step, if it's tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. Regardless, there are plenty of ways to untap artifacts without having to pay that, and also it gives you access to 3 mana on turn 1. And a land-based example is going to be Burgeoning, which is an enchantment for a green. It says whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So basically, if you play this on turn 1, you can have 5 lands in play by the time you put your second land down on turn 2. So yeah, other broken ramp spells are definitely still allowed in Commander. And another example of a pretty ridiculous card in Commander that isn't banned is Serra Ascendant. It's a 1/1 human monk with lifelink that costs a white. But as long as you've got 30 or more life, Serra Ascendant gets +5/+5 and has flying. So yeah, if you get this down on turn 1, you've already got more than 30 life, so you've got a 6/6 flying lifelink human monk. Yeah, for 1 mana, that's kind of broken. But again, things like the social contract, the multiplayer nature of the format, and the fact that it's 100 card Singleton keep things in check. If every single game you got your Serra Ascendant out on turn 1, that wouldn't be very fun. But now let's move on to the last point as to why Sol Ring shouldn't be banned with accessibility. To my knowledge, Sol Ring has been reprinted in every single Commander product. Essentially, it's one of the most reprinted cards out there outside of basic lands. If it was never reprinted, it would be extremely expensive. But because of all its reprints, right now it is only $2.92. Now that's still not completely accessible and completely budget, but it is still seen as affordable by many Magic players. But Sol Ring is extremely budget in comparison to the Moxon, which are hundreds or thousands of dollars a piece. Now actually at this point I'm going to give a little bit of my opinion before I give my conclusion. Accessibility is an argument that some players argue to either ban or not ban a card. Now, even though I'm a budget player, I don't think that accessibility should be considered when it comes to either banning or not banning a card. Just because a card is expensive does not mean that it shouldn't be able to be played. And if accessibility is being considered, then what's the cutoff? Mana Crypt is currently over $100 and is considered to be more powerful than Sol Ring, but yet it's not banned. So is $100 accessible or inaccessible, and who determines that? So with this logic, I don't think that the Moxon should even be banned either. They're extremely expensive cards, but just because they're expensive doesn't mean that they shouldn't be played. If the only reason that Sol Ring is not banned and the Moxon are banned is because of price, I think that that's wrong. Now the argument can of course be made that the Moxon are more powerful than Sol Ring, but I debate that. Regardless, I'll get off my soapbox on accessibility when it comes to bannings. But let me just say that I believe it is a factor that many people consider when it comes to wanting a card banned, and even the rules committee considers it in my opinion. But now let's get to the conclusion, in my opinion, on whether Sol Ring should or should not be banned. In my opinion, Sol Ring kind of defines the format of Commander. It essentially proves that broken cards that are extremely overpowered can be included in this format, but yet the games still feel balanced and fun. Again, the variance and the multiplayer nature of the format balance out broken cards, even one as broken as Sol Ring. So in my opinion, Sol Ring should definitely not be banned. And with that, this show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this are. Should Sol Ring be banned or should it stay unbanned? So yeah, let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.